Good afternoon. Today is Tuesday, January 26th. We are here for our Talent Management Monthly Chat, Twitter chat, and I'm really excited to introduce you to today's guest. Just for people that this is your first time attending our Twitter chat, we start with a live interview for around 25 minutes with an expert in the field, and then we move over to Twitter for another half an hour for a live interactive chat. So today our guest is Charlie Judy. I'm sure a lot of you, if you're in the world of HR, there's no way you haven't heard of Charlie. Charlie has been working in HR executive positions, global organizations for over 20 years. He is a renowned blogger. Most people are familiar with his work, does really, really good work in the blogging world. And he's also, I want to learn a little bit more about this, but he does a lot of traveling. He's been doing business in a lot of different parts of the world. And Charlie is now going out there and becoming an entrepreneur. He started a new company called WorkXO, and today he's going to talk to us a little bit more about what he does there. And really excited to have you here today, Charlie.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here. It's these are my favorite things to do.
So let's start off, Charlie, just talk to me a little bit more about the new company you started, WorkXO. What made you decide to start the company, and what are you guys all about?
Yeah, so what made me start or decide to start the company is probably a much harder question to answer than it is to ask. There's a lot behind it. Obviously, just call it a 20-year itch that I finally had to scratch. Having lived in organizations that struggle with things that are complex and dynamic, and I have a real passion and interest in trying to solve. And so I believe, and my partners believe, that at the root of much of what happens in the workplace is culture, and understanding the culture, your very own unique and distinct culture, in a way that I think we often don't take enough time to do, can give you some pretty amazing insights, some pretty powerful tools to map, solutions, to map strategy, to map just the environment that you need to create in order to optimize your workforce and what you're trying to do. So that's what we're focused on. We use a couple of assessment tools, one that we've built ourselves to really start to, kind of get to the heart of the matter. Our chief product is called the Workplace Genome Mapping. We really like this idea of kind of creating the genome of a workplace and understanding the genetic markers and the things that make you tick, make you who you are, make you work the way that you work, and using then the findings from those assessments to start to build that blueprint. So that's effectively what we're doing. I've got two great partners, Jamie Notter, who's a cultural change consultant and also believes very strongly in using culture to fix things and to realize opportunities. Maddie Grant, who's a digital strategist, and we feel there's a really strong digital component to everything that we do in the workplace today. Yeah. And so my experience in the realm of HR, Jamie's experience in the realm of change and culture, and Maddie's in digital kind of make us focus on our mission, which is really upgrading work.
Yeah. So one of the themes that you brought up a lot, Charlie, and I really agree with you, and I'd love to talk to you a little bit more just in terms of overarching in HR. You talk about how we're over-engineering HR. Can you talk to me a little bit more about what that means and what that means to you in terms of how that's happening?
Yeah, I mean, it means a lot of things, but I think at its core, I think we look to solve problems through programmatic responses. We look for policies and programs and new technologies and the next kind of shiny object or best practice to fix something specific about work. And what happens a lot of times is those things are really vehicles. They may be vehicles to change, but in order for them to really be effective, you got to start with something that's a little bit more fundamental. I mean, you got to start with who you are. You want to talk about fixing or getting better about process improvement. You got to start with culture. Like, if you don't do that first, then any effort you ever make towards process improvement is either going to be short-lived, under-optimized, or completely missed. And so when I say over-engineer, it has a lot to do with running towards a solution before we've really taken the time to really understand the root of the problem.
So would you think that that goes back to one of the things that I'm really passionate about is really humanizing HR? Absolutely.
If you were to throw every policy and program and tool that you've ever created in the trash can as an HR leader and just spend a little bit more time talking to the people that you're there to support and to motivate and to encourage and to create the kind of place where they can do what they love to do, I'm thinking that we'll be a lot more successful. People that are really good at implementing programs and following protocol and process when it comes to people are those that are pretty bad at actually dealing with people. and so it's very easy to hide behind these things and to use them as a barrier to just authenticity and a real kind of more intimate connection in a way that gets you, again, to the heart of the matter here. It is the human being we are ultimately talking about.
And really, when you say that, do you think that's partly they need to humanize that as well, just in terms of getting the buy-in for the organization as well, to help the leaders who are all behind this, for them to understand it also can't be just about compliance and creating procedures and all that kind of stuff. They need to be connecting with them and help them understand why it's so critical for the organization to be successful.
Yeah. So if you look at, like, if you were to take a pie chart of all the things, all of the components of work that we know have to be there in order to be effective, that and pie chart's probably not the right, the right image, but the pieces of that pie chart are they're not all the same size, right? And so figuring out which ones need to be the biggest and which ones need to be the smallest, based again on who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, and then ultimately the kinds of behaviors, beliefs, values that you need to use to get there, the pieces of that pie change. So in some organizations, that compliance or that policy piece may be a little bit bigger than others. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means that it's maybe not as crucial a component. The human piece, if we just want to call that, generally, that ought to be a pretty big piece of that pie all the time. And I don't care what organization you're talking about. I don't care if you're an engineering firm or you're manufacturing widgets. At the heart of that culture is the human being, and that better be the bigger piece. Do you like the way I did the pie piece?
Yes, I do. I really enjoyed the pie that's going on there. I haven't had lunch. You're making me hungry.
Oh, sorry.
So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about what you're doing in terms of that mapping, because I think a lot of times when we talk about culture, people get lost. So talk to me about, what does that mapping look like? How do we get at that roots of the map and start building from there?
Yeah. So you're right, people do get lost, and I think there are a couple of reasons for it. One, it's very easy to go to touchy-feely, kind of squishy talk when you mention culture. It's just kind of our natural reaction. So what we've really focused on doing in our model is creating a language for culture. And we have 8 dynamics that we feel are pretty good at giving you that pie, that entire pie. And if we can measure how people experience those dynamics in the workplace, then we've done a pretty good job of kind of getting the key markers to what that experience looks like.
Right.
And I know we don't have the time nor the interest of going into all the science behind our model, but one of the things our model does, which we think is very important, is it takes off the table altogether any notion of good or bad. Right. We want to measure. Let's not even start thinking about that, because first of all, that's all relative, again, to who you are and who you need to be. I'm not going to come to you and say, we're not going to come to you and say, we've got the recipe for your success, because actually the recipe for your success is very unique and distinct. And so what we really start with is measuring let's start with understanding who we are first.
Yeah.
Let's be cool with that. Let's put some language behind it. So when we talk about things like transparency and agility and how we manage change and how we use hierarchy and all those other things, we've got a language to use. And so it's not so squishy. It's not so, kind of touchy-feely. We can actually go to some concrete conversations around it.
Yeah. So, I mean, talk to me a little bit more about what culture acuity is, if I'm saying that properly.
Give me the context. I'm sorry. What's the term?
Culture acuity. So when you start to look at those different things about your employee brand, by being clear about what that culture is, so that when people are coming to you, you're getting the right people.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is where I think some organizations perpetuate the challenge in culture. And every time you bring someone new on board, you are doing something to your culture, good, bad, indifferent. But that person is going to bring their own set of experiences, their own set of beliefs. And some of those things you can modify, some of them you can influence. It's unlikely that you can change them. It's unlikely that you can control them, certainly. So if there are certain key characteristics about who you are that are crucial to your success, then you really need to make sure that you're being as open and transparent about what those characteristics are to the outside world, so that the people who are taking the time to understand whether or not they want to invest their talents and energies with your organization can understand that those things are important and can make decisions about whether or not those are the kinds of things that they themselves want to experience. Everybody wants to experience work a little bit differently. There's certainly some commonalities, but the more acute, the more open and transparent and specific you can be about what those things are. The whole fit exercise now is a two-way street. It's not just the organization making decisions about whether or not you're going to be the fit for our organization. It's the employee or the prospective employee that gets the opportunity to make a decision about whether or not they're going to fit in your organization. And that's kind of, that two-way street isn't really flowing too well right now.
Yeah. So when you've worked to do that mapping process, what does that look like? Is that surveying? Because I think one of the other things is it needs to take some time. It's not something you rush into. You want to spend that time, because it's good time to really get at the appropriate data. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously a multi-phased approach, and it's iterative. The first conversation is always, what are we trying to do with culture? People will come to us, and I'm sure others listening to this will have experienced this themselves. They'll say, we've got a culture problem, and we've got to fix that. Well, are we fixing the culture, or are we trying to fix something else? Are we trying to fix an outcome, or a particular component of the operating system, let's say? Let's get clear on what that is first. For some people, it's, we're not really good at talking about who we are, and we got to focus on how we share that. For others, it's, we're having trouble making changes in any sort of fluid sense. And that's the piece of our culture that's important. So understanding that on the front end then helps us figure out, again, how are we going to go about measuring it, and what should we be focused on? I mean, just from a mechanics perspective, our model does have a survey basis to it. It's a different kind of survey. It takes 12 minutes. It's not good, bad. It's slide left, slide right. on how much you really experience certain things. We can also, because we are very conscious of survey fatigue spreading across North America, that there is good data that organizations already gather, and we can do some things to take that data that already exists and kind of plug it into our model to generate a different set of output. So the input may be the same, the output is a little bit different. It's a lot a bit different, but it is nonetheless a transference of information as opposed to having to go out and gather all of it over again.
So have you started to work with some clients where you're getting to see some of those success outcomes?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple of really great stories. One is an organization that is in a very, very tight market. They've got a position, a major position in their business that is literally the hardest position to fill in the United States. And one of the things that they were bumping up against again and again and again was that the industry for that position is such a revolving door, because everybody's really saying the same thing. And so people weren't, the incumbents weren't really in a position to make a good decision about what they were going to get if they were to go there versus there versus there. And they really wanted to tell a different story. And so they started with this measurement process, this workplace genome that we do. We produce for them their story, effectively. This is who you are. And we were able to see from that the things that really stand out as being a differentiator when compared to others in that industry. They've since then started to not only weave that into their to their branding and their messaging, and into the content that they're creating for prospective recruits, but they're also weaving it into their selection process. And they've designed some things that will allow them to screen and or kind of interview and question candidates based on that cultural fit. So again, they're taking this understanding of who they are and they're starting to plug it into the front end of the talent process, so that at least they're feeding that funnel with kind of the right fit. We have other examples. That's one, of course.
So, and why do you think some of these companies are getting it wrong? Why do you think there's some sort of fear around doing this and spending the time and changing? And one of the things that you're saying is that we really need to create a new operating system. You know, why do you think some people are fearful or not? I mean, I know some people just don't want to see it's changed, right? One of the things you're saying is this was going on since 1900. It's not the same. It's not the same anymore. So, you know, how do we make organizations take more of this people-centric focus?
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded question. I think everything starts with awareness. You know, before you can do any sort of wholesale or substantive change, you've got to heighten your awareness around whatever it is you're trying to change.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I think while simplistic, it's very powerful to just don't look at this as this broad scale transformation project, right? Start with step one, which is let's understand, let's seek to understand, because once we've got that, the rest of it starts to seem less daunting. Now I can divide and conquer. Now I can prioritize. Now I have, you know, some clarity on some stuff that until then we were just making broad-based assumptions about. That's the other piece. I mean, your question was multifaceted, but I think sometimes people get this wrong because they are operating under their own assumptions. It's like if I were to ask you, who are you? You know, tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to say some things that everybody says because it's hard to talk about who you are. And so if we can help you get to the meat, right, the meat on the bones, then all of a sudden that conversation sounds a little bit different, and all of a sudden you're able to kind of share some things that maybe other people aren't sharing. It's taken that next step that really is for whatever reason hard for people to do. There is a very simple, I don't want to look in the mirror. I can't tell you the number of HR leaders I've talked to that have said, yeah, we need to do something like this, but we're afraid of what we're going to find.
So they're perfect candidate.
Right. And so, which of course, makes you want to bang the table. But I think there's some reality to that. And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to take out, you got to own that, because whether you like it or not, it's who you are. And the more you deny that, the more you're going to be stuck in the mud.
Yeah, it's really, I talked to this with some other guests around this as well. It's that, if you start to build what those differentiators are, you think it's here, but you have to take it another level and another level and another level. You start to talk about these are our behaviors, and there's just these kind of overarching, not really getting at the heart of it. And until you can really be very clear and understand what that is at the heart of it, how are you going to make it really differentiate yourself and help other people understand what it really looks like to work there?
Yeah, I mean, and you can draw parallels to all sorts of things. It's one of the reasons why we like the kind of the genome, analogy, is because, if you think about your own personal health, now you can take your blood pressure and you can know that your blood pressure is high, but there are a lot of things that could be driving that. And so the typical employee engagement survey is kind of a blood pressure measure, right? It's measuring outcomes. Which is important. You need to know what your blood pressure is. But what you need to then dive deeper into and peel away is what's at the heart of that. Pardon the pun. And how do you then start kind of honing in on those things? That's the tough ones.
So one of the things I would really suggest people have a look at is your website. And one of the things that I really like as well is your manifesto. How did you go about building that manifesto? And, why are you so passionate about that, Charlie? Because I'm passionate for the same reasons, but I'd love to hear why you really passionately want to help companies understand that and operate from that kind of manifesto.
Yeah, that's a document that my partners and I are really proud of, and it actually reflects some thinking of a number of people that I couldn't even list all on this call. It started with about 10 people who locked ourselves in a cabin in the middle of Omaha, Nebraska, several years ago, and we were literally just talking about the future of work. And that manifesto, or at least the early versions of that manifesto, was one of the outputs of 2 days of spitballing and whiteboarding and challenging and arguing around the future of work, and we really landed on, again, the importance of humanization. The importance of getting back to the basics, the importance of human connections and networking, and that's again why we think the digital component to this is really so important, and the importance of culture. So it's great that it's not my document, and it's not Maddie's document, and it's not Jamie's document. It's actually 10 people who I really think are thought leaders in this space. Who have helped us pull that together.
So some of the stuff in the manifesto that I really related to as well is with organizations taking a holistic approach. It's the whole person, a social responsibility, being more involved in social good, creating environments where people can be they're using their talents. They have an environment where they can have the meaning in their work and they can have that flow. So, which when people are in flow, it's a win-win for everyone, right? People are just using those natural talents of theirs and they're in that flow. The organization, from their standpoint, they're getting that increased productivity and people are really passionate about what they're doing. Are you seeing certain companies, there's the big ones that you hear about, but some other organizations that are really starting to get it, who are innovating? And are you, from your standpoint, I guess what I want to know is, are you finding more people are getting it and wanting to do it in a meaningful way? Not because it's just about the dollar values, but they're getting the bigger picture about, what running businesses is all about.
Yeah, I mean, there are organizations that are starting to get it. I mean, I think it's why you hear words like culture and authenticity and transparency a lot more, even just, in the the normal trade communications. I think what's really powerful about the recognizing the whole self and what it might do for your workplace is that, human beings are pretty freaking amazing, and they're pretty ridiculously optimistic, as both of our partners like to say. But a lot of that doesn't show up in the workplace because for whatever reason, a switch gets flipped that moves us from being the person we are to the person we need to be in one place to the next. And I think the more that we can blur those lines, the more that we can break those barriers down, so that, again, your whole self is showing up. The power, we may not even be able to really fully contemplate at this point. And so I think organizations that are being successful about this, or that are successful in this, they're creating the environment. They're not worrying too much about the systems and the controls and all of those other things. They're creating the environment in which the person will show up. Yeah. And the talents that person brings will show up naturally. They've removed barriers for that. They've taken the time to understand what those barriers are. Yeah. And again, they're not trying to fix the outcome. They're trying to pave the way. And that's an important distinction.
We're going to end it there, because I hope we see more and more companies really getting that. And I'm glad you're doing the work you're doing, because you're having a lot more conversations with companies and giving them an opportunity to take that step. So we are going to move over to Twitter. We're going to have a conversation for the next half hour. Charlie is graciously going to stay with us and be part of that conversation and contribute. And look forward to speaking with everybody on Twitter in a couple of minutes.
Thanks again for having me. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Charlie.
All right.